Okay, could I have everyone rise? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. So this is the Bank School District's Budget Committee meeting. We do have two people on our Budget Committee. Hopefully one is online on Zoom. Yep. And Kristen, thank you. There will be public comment, but it needs to be associated with our budget meeting as far as topics. And with that, we will turn it over to election of chair and vice chair of our budget committee or committee. So with that, is there a motion for chair of the budget committee? Two people.
I'll volunteer to do it.
All right.
Okay.
All in favor of Tom being chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And vice chair nomination, that'd be Kristen.
You
Yeah.
don't have a choice.
All
Aye.
aye.
Thank you both.
That passes unanimously. Okay, Tom, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't have an air gavel here. I'll kind of have to do. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. I guess the next item here is to approve the proposed agenda. Does anyone have any motions to change the agenda from what's before us? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve it as presented.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
Second it.
all in favor of approving the agenda as it is?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, so now we go to number 4, budget message. Jeff, the baton is yours.
So Jeff is not with us, so I will read the superintendent's budget message from Mr. Leo. It has been a challenging but successful year for students, staff, parents, and community. We've been able to welcome back students for the full school year and make good progress on student learning. Our highest priority is still the health and safety of our students and staff. We continue to be aware of the academic, social, and emotional challenges that our students face and remain committed to providing the opportunity for a quality education for our students. The 2022-2023 budget is based on a state school fund appropriation of $9.3 billion for the 2021-2023 biennium. The budget also includes substantial one-time funds from both federal and state government, full funding for the Student Success Act, and full funding for the Student Investment Account, or SIA. This additional funding will allow us to maintain the instructional and support framework of our district, maintain our lower class sizes, and provide for additional support to students for the upcoming year. In the 2020-2021 school year, the district lost 79 students. We anticipated recovering a portion of those students in the following school year. However, with additional COVID challenges, our enrollment actually continued to decline. And for the 2021-2022 school year, we lost another 39 students. We are also continuing the trend of our graduating senior class being substantially larger than our incoming kindergarten class. These trends are not unique to our district, but are being felt by the surrounding districts as well. For the 2022-2023 budget, we are projecting a small increase in enrollment, anticipating additional students coming from increased housing in the community, strong interdistrict transfers, and expected continued easing of the pandemic. One major addition to the 2022-2023 budget is the addition of a life skills classroom at the high school. The need for this additional FTE is due to the increased number of students in our structured learning program at the elementary school, the life skills program for grades 6 through 12, and the transition program post high school. We have outgrown our current 6th through 12th grade site at the middle school and will need to expand into the high school with a new classroom. The district is committed to meet the challenges of educating our children in these uncertain times. We will continue to be good stewards of our financial resources and look for ways to innovate and improve. The disruptions and uncertainty caused by the pandemic had a significant impact on our students and staff and families. Everyone has stepped up to meet the challenges of the past 2 years, and we thank you for all your hard work. We anticipate the 2022-2023 school year to represent a more complete return to normalcy and hope to see a stabilization of our enrollment, attendance, and learning environment. Respectfully submitted, Jeff Leo, Superintendent.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Jeff, wherever you are. So now I guess we move on to presentation of the budget. Joni?
Hey, this is the fun part, right?
Yeah.
I put, for those of you who have been on the budget committee before, I put a little bit more detail in the budget document. If you keep going, there are the budget guiding principles that were right behind the message that Jacob just read. These are principles that were adopted by the board and will go through the end of next year, the 2022-2023 budget. After that, the board will adopt future guiding principles. And then if you go, actually, it's a little ways back. It's called the budget overview. It's before, it's actually right before Jeff's message. The budget overview, and we're going to talk about that a little more. I'm going to do a little more detail because we have a new member and a new board member, and so I think it will be good. And as I'm leaving, I just want to make sure that people have this information. So it is still skimming the surface. I would say if we really wanted to do justice to how the budget works, we could have like an 8-hour class on it, right? And I know that a lot of administrators have that. But I promise I won't do that to you tonight. So, all right. So I did want to go over quickly the budget committee's. I'm going to go back. This feels like maybe I won't be standing to you guys past yet.
Yep.
Budget committee responsibilities. Tonight, the goal of the budget committee is to receive the budget message, which was just read. And then what we're going to talk about, to provide for public comment, which will happen after I'm done speaking. We'll have time for public comment. And then to make recommendations and changes to the proposed appropriations if it's determined by a majority of the committee that that is desirable. There may also be questions or things that we need to answer, and the committee can decide to either approve the budget tonight and send it to the school board for approval, or we will meet again Thursday evening to talk again if we have things that we need to address. So the ultimate goal of the budget committee is to approve the budget for adoption by the school board in June, and it has to be approved in June. We have to send to the county assessor's office what we are collecting in property taxes and things like that. So it needs to be approved by the June meeting. So if you look at that overview, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the different funds that we use here at the Bay School District, and other districts use the same. Our general fund down here, whoops. Right, the big blue part is obviously the whole of our finances. Most everything operationally runs through our general fund, which comprises 67% of our total assets. So in the book, our total assets are about $21 million. That's the total financial budget. And this represents about 14 million. The second largest is what we call our special projects fund. That is where any kind of grant or restricted money goes. So we have money that's restricted by the state, restricted by the federal government, board restricted, or donor restricted. It's where our extracurricular money flows in and out. Our athletics flows in and out through there. Food service flows in and out from there. So it's our second largest fund. And we're going to spend the bulk of tonight talking about the general fund and special project fund. The other funds are very small, kind of self-explanatory. The debt service fund, that's the fund where we collect all the property tax and we pay our bond debt for our buildings. Capital projects fund represents about 3%, and that's where we would account for any facility expansion or capital projects that we do in the district. And then internal service funds is sort of an accounting vehicle by which we pay for our pension bond obligation. Years ago, back in 2007, the district took out a pension bond to fund the unfunded actuarial evaluation. And we are paying off that bond as we go. And that's just sort of an accounting method. So those are described in here, should you have other questions, but that is, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the first two that I've talked about. So let's go back to the general fund. So let's start with the general fund. It is, as I said, the basic primary operating fund that accounts for most all revenues and expenditures, except for those that are required to be accounted for in another fund. So we account for things by various categories: salaries, payroll costs, purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, and other general expenses. So everything gets coded that way. We also, secondly, account for all expenditures by what's called major function category. And as we get into talking about expenditures, I can talk more about it, but that's basically like a 1,000 function is all of your educational staff. A 2,000 function is all your support staff, or your counselors and speech pathologists and things like that. And then revenue in the general fund comes from three main sources: primarily state school fund, local property taxes, and of course the big beginning fund balance that we start with. So that is the general fund. So when we talk about revenue, funding of revenue is primarily based on enrollment. Enrollment drives our revenue, our state school fund. So you can't really talk about how you're budgeting your state school fund, until you talk about what's happening with your enrollment. And our enrollment, it's changing. It's a little bit fluctuating. And what I want to show is this is a 10-year graph. So you can kind of see for the past, this 1,130 here is when the pandemic sort of started, 1,130. And before that, we were somewhere around there. We had a little blip in 16, 17 where we got lots of students, and that's because open enrollment that year was bonkers. We got like 90 students, and we normally get about 40. So I don't know why, other than the open enrollment, I think Arlo started like 3 years before that. I think people just sort of caught on that they could do that. And I don't recall whether we didn't keep those or whatever, but we went down again the following year. And our open enrollment went back to about 40 kids opening enrollment. So other than that 1 year blip, we've been around about 1,100. And when I talk about that, when I say 1,100, I mean students, buses. These are the kids that show up. That isn't how we're funded either, but that's where we start. So we have about 1,100. Then in 2020, 2021, when the pandemic hit, as Jeff mentioned in his message, we lost about 80 students. And it varies, fluctuates every day, but it's about 80 students. And we knew we lost those students to homeschooling, private schools saw a big jump for many reasons. And then that year, we really felt they would come back the next year, the current year we're in. But instead, we have actually lost more this year, more students than already the low number. And at times, this was as of April 2016. We've been down at like 1,008 and right around 1,000. So, it fluctuates, but we're not too terribly much above 1,000. So the question, and I will say that this is true of every district in the state of Oregon. This isn't just Banks. It's true at Forest Grove. It's true at every place I've looked. And the question I think all school districts are grappling with is, will we get these kids back? For Banks, it's twofold. It's the pandemic, but it's also, as Jeff also mentioned, our kinder class is smaller than our graduating class. That is also a trend in the state. Birth rates are down. and everybody has declining enrollment. That sort of helps that everybody has declining enrollment because there's still the same pot of money that gets split up around fewer kids in all districts. But it still has taken money away from us for sure. So what we have decided to do, this 2022-23 projection, we've obviously had to tell ODE what we project for next year. And we are projecting to get some of those kids back. Either some of those kids back, new kids, we have some new apartments, we have new housing in the district. We have some things going on. There's still open enrollment, inter-district transfer. Now, most schools are getting pretty stingy with that. We've been trying to to move your child inter-district transfer, but the districts are not giving up their students. So, but we will still get some. So we are projecting to start next year, butts in seats, students that walk through the door, about 1,040. That is an inherent risk in the budget. If we don't do that, if we don't get more kids, we'll talk soon about how much we're funded per student, but it would be 20, 30 students at $9,000 or $10,000 a head is $250,000, $300,000. But we feel okay about that number. But we will watch it. So that is really important because enrollment drives everything. And then you take your enrollment and you tell ODE, this is what we have. We have 1,040 students. And then I know we talked about ADM and ADMW. So they weight some of those. We get different weights for ESL kids, for students with an IEP, students in poverty, foster care, neglected. We get a small high school bump. So we are actually funded, we're actually projecting to be funded at 1,185 about students. Not that we have 1,185 students sitting in our classroom, but a sped student's going to get more than one weight up to a certain limit. We are capped. We have enough sped students that we have 144 special education students, and we get capped at 11% of ADM. So we get an extra weight for 114 of them, not all 144 of them. It's just the way it works. So this is what starts everything. They think we're going to have 1,185 as our ADMW. So that ADMW that gets calculated, we get estimates from the state. And their estimate says you're going to get a state school fund grant of $11,183,533 for your 1,185 weighted ADM. To that, they add the transportation grant. Transportation grant is where we tell them we're going to spend a certain amount of money on transportation, and they give us a 70% grant. So it gets added right in there. And then, if anybody remembers back in the years of the late 90s, when Measure 5 came along, and then Measure 50 came along to kind of fix Measure 5, the whole equalization formula came about. Because Measure 5 said the property taxes you get in your county or your area goes to your schools. And what that did was create lots of inequity amongst the state. And the legislature said that's unacceptable, and in 1997 they changed that, and now what's considered our local revenue, which is primarily property taxes, common school fund and county school fund, and then this funny little thing called timber revenue, which I'll talk about in a little while as well, comes out of that. So even though we get 11,500,000, we don't actually get 11,500,000. We get a net of we're projecting 7.2 million. And that's why when we say this is how much we're getting from state school fund, and then next month it changes, and the month after it changes, and now we're getting 100,000 more or 100,000 less, it's because these numbers continually change. I mean, the number of kids in the state changes too. A lot of things change. But this is just a projection of what we're going to get in property taxes, a projection of what we are going to get in timber. And so all those estimates we continue to update as we know actual numbers. And so I will guarantee you that this 7.2 million will not be 7.2 million. It's actually not even 7.2 million today because they sent out a new estimate Friday when everybody's already approved their budget. So that's helpful. It wasn't significantly different, so we're still waiting, but that number will change. So that is what sort of funds or creates our assumptions. So our basic assumptions for our general fund revenue is that we are going to be projecting 1,040. Another quirky thing about state school fund is they will fund you on the greater of this year's actual, so the butts and seat that we have this year, or next year's actual, whichever is highest. So for this current year we're in, because we're low this year, we're actually being funded on 2020, 2021 enrollment. But since we are projecting higher for 22, 23, the higher of the prior year or this year's actual of 1,008 versus what we're projecting, obviously we're projecting higher. So that's what we will be funded on. That creates, as we just talked about, this ADMW of 1,184. And the good news is, it's the second year of the biennium. The second year of the biennium, you at least know that the state is going to have revenue of $9.3 billion to give to K-12 education. So we know the state's going to allocate $9.3 billion, and that the state school fund per student will be somewhere around $9,400. And that's up from $9,100 last year. And that is due to a couple things, but one is that this $9.3 billion is the biennial amount. And in the first year, they give you 49%, and in the second year, you get 51%, because roll-up costs are greater from year to year than they did 50-50. Your second year, you'd be kind of in it that way. So those are the assumptions we've made for our revenue for this year. And what that does is give us all these numbers. And I don't want us to get lost in the numbers. What I'm trying to show here is here's our revenue areas: state school funds, property taxes, county funds, common school, and timber. This is what was adopted for the year we're in, 21-22. This is where I am projecting we will end up. That will also change, but right now that's our projection. And this is what we are proposing, the last column for this year. So here's the 7.2 we talked about. Our property taxes, we believe, will go from 3.4 million to 3.6 million. That's a 4.3% increase. Some of that is collection of past property taxes. People are beginning to pay, people who were able to pay property taxes during some of the last few years. We're collecting more in old stuff, because there is a cap of 3% on an increase in property taxes. These I'm not talking about too much. I'm happy to if you want, but they're smaller amounts, county, common. And then there's timber revenue. Timber revenue, I mean, anybody who's been on the board for very long or heard me talk very long is like crazy, makes no sense, but it is what it is. Here is what our timber revenue has been over the last 10 years. 7 million, 1.2, 1.3, 350,000, back up to 1.3 million. So it's just all over the board. It just, and the other problem with timber is two of the payments, we get 4 payments a year. 2 of them come in after the end of June. They come in July and August, they get counted towards this year. So we've had 2 strong payments, but we don't know what the next 2 payments will be. I used to say I gauge it by the number of logging trucks that are going by I can hear run by my office. It's like, well, sounds like a lot of logs are going by. I mean, that's about how you have to do this. It's kind of hard. But what we have chosen to do as a district, what's been done before I came here, we budgeted at 750,000 pretty much every year, because it's sort of middle of the road. It doesn't really matter because it gets taken out of our state school fund. It's the local revenue that gets back here where we talked about the local revenue that gets taken out. It's this number down here. So if I get 0, the state school fund's gonna give me $750,000 more dollars. But if I get 1.5 million, they're gonna take away $750,000. And they're not gonna do that now because that would make too much sense. They're gonna do it a year and a half from now. They're gonna adjust a future year. So this is what happens when we talk about ending fund balance. If you get 1.5, so your ending fund balance is huge, but 750,000 of it is owed back to ODE in a future year. So you can't count that because your future year, you're not gonna have the money to pay it back if you do that. So it's a tough one, and most school districts don't have this. There's very few school districts that have this state timber. And I just wish they'd do something different because it would make us look like we know how to budget better, because this number will be wrong, because this number will be wrong. You know, it just is going to be that way. But so we're leaving that at 750,000. And there's just a crazy graph that shows how it kind of goes back and forth. So don't. And the other, okay, so we go back here. So then we have other local revenues that come in as revenues. That is, you know, rentals on the building, in any, you know, our building facilities, just other things that come in that are all interest, small by nature, that add up to a little bit. And then, of course, beginning fund balance. And beginning fund balance is your prior year's ending fund balance. So that is counted as revenue. So our general fund is made up of about $14 million. That's what we're projecting for next year. This year, we have budgeted 14.425. We think we might end up pretty close, 14.431, but not necessarily in the same, you know, buckets that we thought it would be in. We have a higher ending fund balance, beginning fund balance, because of course our pandemic year, we didn't spend as much money as we had budgeted because we didn't have kids for much, like the whole year, most of the year. And that created savings in all kinds of areas. So this is what we are proposing, almost $14.2 million. So that's revenue. And just to show it in a graphic form for people who are kind of visual, about, what is that, 50% of our revenue is from state school funds, so it's important, obviously. Almost 30% is from property taxes. And then the biggest chunk is our beginning fund balance. That is revenue. Now let's talk about expenses. So we know our revenue. I'm a firm believer that if you determine your revenue first, and then you budget expenses that you can afford, rather than, oh, here's what I want to do, now let me back into revenue that allows me to do it. Because what happens to that is you come up with revenue that you somehow try to justify, it does not pan out. So we look at expenditures second. The main assumptions we're making for this year is that we are going to maintain our current staffing and service levels. To do that, we are going to have to use some of our ending fund balance that we've been saving, and that has been building for a couple of years with some of the pandemic savings. Because our enrollment is going, you know, well, budgeting a little increase, but not enough to make up the difference of the increase dollar to maintain your current staff. So we're not in a negotiation year with our unions, so we know what our steps are, we know what our COLAs are. We know what our increase in insurance to our employees is. We know, well, we know everything. We know what our PERS rates are, that's a big deal. We know what our contracted days are, that we contract for 192 days with our staff. And we know what our staffing is, because we've made a commitment to maintaining our staff. So that's a big deal. In a new year of a biennium and in a negotiating year, this is always much crazier because you just don't know these things usually when you're doing the budget. The big add to the budget is going to be this increase in special education that Jeff talked about in his message. We have a lot of students in our life skills room, our on our transitions, and I guess in middle school they call it life skills. It's what we call our most restricted classrooms. So what we need to do is add a classroom. I've said here in the high school, at BHS, you know, a lot of this has not totally been determined, but we know we need another classroom, which requires another staff member and another classified staff member. So that is an increase. We know we do buy many services from the ESD. We know that those costs have gone up 2.5%. We know that our PACE liability rates, that's our insurance, our liability insurance, and all is going up about 11%. That's a lot. And we have this big looming, oh my gosh, inflation thing and increased costs for school maintenance. We don't really know what inflation, we know that we have seen the effects of inflation already on our supply budgets and things like that. And we know that our facilities require a lot of maintenance, and we bumped that up a little because every year we need more and more. So those are the main differences in our expenditures coming up. So here's sort of the way that then looks in a bunch of number terms. Again, this is our budget for the current year we're in, 21-22, and what we project. So we thought we would spend $12.8 million, and we think we're going to be somewhere around 12.1. A lot of that is up here in salaries and benefits. And we are all well aware of the staffing challenges we have faced this year. I mean, it's tragic and it's horrible. It's not that we don't want to spend the money, it's that we can't open the door and throw it to anybody, right? We can't get anybody to take it. So this is, again, not unique to banks. I know everybody knows that. It's a statewide shortage of workers. It's, you know, we have had not only not being able to get substitutes, but we've also had unfilled positions that have gone unfilled all year. So it's not like they come and go even, it's all year. So we have saved some money, and this will, then down here, you get this ending fund balance. That will take our ending fund balance from about from what we budgeted, 1,653,000, up to what we're projecting is about 2.3 million. So it's primarily those savings. I mean, there's other savings amongst here too, but it really is primarily in staffing. So for next year, we are budgeting to have the same positions as we adopted in the year before budget. And we are budgeting to actually fill those jobs. We have to budget that, and we have to work hard to do that. So that will bring our total expenses up to about 13.1 million from the 12.1. We are also having to budget an increase in our supplies because everything's just costing tons more money. And we notice it every day, as everybody notices it every day. So those are the main differences. We always budget a contingency of $50,000 for the unknown. It gives the board flexibility to have a little pause, you know, let's say the boiler goes out or something else. I've been here 10 years and we've never spent it. So, but it is required by law to have a contingency. So we have that. So in order to do that and have these increased costs, we are going to have to use some of our fund balance that we've been saving over the last couple of years. And I firmly believe that we should use it to maintain our programs next year. And we're going to bring our fund balance down to about 7%. So our board policy is that fund balance cannot go below 5%. OSB recommends 8 to 10%. I will also say this is what lots of districts are doing. We're having to do that to maintain our programs, because I think the last thing we need to do is make things worse for next year by reducing staff because we want to keep an ending fund balance high. And then our students who are already struggling have fewer adults to help them. So we believe it's a good appropriate investment. The other reason it feels okay is because the next 2 years are in new funding. This is what's happening everywhere. And I think the legislators will understand that and provide a good, maybe more better, that's not that, more better state school fund allocation to K-12 education. And so, so we feel good about that. That is what we are proposing for expenses. And I want to talk a little bit about, because unrestricted ending fund balance, and by unrestricted, I mean that ending fund balance that we can actually use versus that portion of ending fund balance that we eventually have to pay back to ODE because we got our local revenues off of, right? It's a topic of great discussion. It's a topic of great debate, and I will miss those conversations completely. I really will. They're great. They're good conversations, you know. And we have, as a district, stayed at, you know, somewhere around 12, 13% over the last 10 years. It's just sort of hovered there. Then this is the year where it went up, the 2020, 2021 pandemic year, where we saved money. So our ending fund balance went up. We're using some of that this year because we've got more students. And then next year, we're going to go down to a level we have not been for a long time. And I look back way more than 10 years even. And, you know, we haven't been at that level. So this is what we're projecting to do. Now, I will tell you, it will never end up at 7%. It may, you know, if we have trouble hiring staff, I mean, you just don't know what will happen, right? It may be higher. It may be lower. It will not go below 5%. And right now, the board, if we approve this budget, we don't have approval to let it go below the 7% appropriation. So that's where we're sort of holding it right now. I will say again, every district I have looked at the top with are doing the same thing. They're taking their reserves down. So then we talk about our expenditures. So all those numbers we saw, just to kind of show you that 55% of those are what we call instruction. So those are our teachers, basically, and our classified staff that work with students. The 35% are what we call support services. So that's counselors, speech pathologists, nurse, district office staff, administrators, all fall into this 35% category. And then everything else sort of falls, you know, isn't very significant because this is about 90% of our whole budget. And it's mostly staff, obviously, that make that up. This as a percentage is very standard. 55, 35, 60, 40, 50. I mean, it's right in the ballpark of where we should be. So I want to talk a little bit about class size. We haven't talked a lot in the teams I think really about class size. And I show this because I want to say that I clearly understand that the numbers I'm going to show are not the class sizes that most teachers have. And I'm not trying to say that when we get over here that these are the class sizes. This is very nuanced, but this is a general, what we've been able to do despite our restrictions we've had on our money. As we know, we've gotten a lot of extra money in the way of grants, SIA, ESSER funds, Major 98, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that we've been able to hire staff with that. So we actually have more staff than we've ever had in the history of banks working with students currently. So as you can see, so the green is the elementary school, the blue is the middle school, and then the yellow is the high school. So for many years, and I've only done 5 years here, but for 3, you know, we were up around 27 students in the classroom in elementary. We started bringing that down, and we're going to project, we're holding that because we added some staff with those grants, not with general fund money because we didn't have it, but with the grants. And the same is exactly true of the middle school and the high school. we're projecting it down here. You see these numbers, 18 and 19, class sizes of 18 and 19. I am not saying that every high school and middle school teacher has a class of 18 and 19. Some are 35 and some are 12. But that is true because you have electives that have maybe 10 or 12 kids in it. And then you have a Spanish class that's not at 35. So it's just to show that we have been able to bring down our class sizes. Some of that was when last year, or this year was the first year, I think we made the change to the 7th period day of the middle school. And we added 2 full-time teachers. And so if you just simply take teachers divided by students, this is what it comes out to. I know that's not the class sizes teachers have, some have less, some have more. Overall, I think what principals do is they look at total students for your whole schedule and divide that out versus each class. But I just want to show that we have been able to make an investment in bringing, in having more teachers and more staff working with students. Even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, and this year's been hard because a lot of the staff aren't here all the time because of illnesses, obviously with the pandemic. So this should be something we continue to do if we can financially do it, because it's important. Okay, so that's the general, basically. In a nutshell, a million things you could talk about. I hope I didn't talk too much. The second fund I want to talk about is that next is the biggest fund called the Special Revenue Fund. These funds account for proceeds of specific revenues from federal, state, county, and local sources that are legally restricted for certain expenditures. So I'm going to talk about our federally restricted grants, and we've gotten a lot more of these than we've ever had before. We have Title I, Title II, and Title IV. Those are our title monies. This number is what we're going to get this year. We're going to get $44,667. Bad number. I'm not happy with that. This year we have about $81,000, and we're going to be cut nearly in half. That's because Title I is based on poverty. There's 4 funding streams for Title I, of which 3 funding streams we are now cut from because our poverty is too low. And that's because of the new census. So we are only getting 1 strand of that money, which is $44,000. Can't run much of a program on $44,000. So what we're going to do, because you can do this, you can grade these title funds, we're going to move our Title II money up to Title I. So it'll give us about $64,000. And that will fund a 0.4 certified and then a half-time classified staff for next year. What it does is it takes away Title II money, which is for mostly it's class size reduction or it's like professional development. We will find other creative ways to do professional development. A lot of it is like, you know, we just put some things in other budgets, and then we also have this Title IV money that can be used for that as well. So I think it'll be okay. We just felt like we cannot run a program that is very meaningful on $44,000. The IDEA money is our special education money. This year, actually 21-22, we got about $46,000 more through the American Rescue Plan that is good can be used next year. So this is actually going to be about $50,000 higher than the current year, and we are going to be able to fund an additional position, classified position this year out of the general fund. The ESSA is a small grant. We have a classified staff person doing that. And then of course the ESSER money. So the ESSER money is obviously a big pot of money. We have ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. That's the elementary, secondary, something. It's the CARES Act. CARES Act money, and it came in 3 funding streams. ESSER 1, we have spent buying all kinds of masks and things like that the first year of the pandemic. ESSER 2 was $266,000, and this year we are projecting to spend about $200,000 of it. And we are funding some SPED staff in the high school with that because those students needed extra supports and we had nowhere really to get the money at that time. So we decided to use the ESSER money. And then and now we have ESSER 3, which is about $600,000. And so we have $656,000 that can be spent. Many districts are getting a leg up on their facilities. They're doing HVAC systems. We've talked about redoing the whole HVAC system at the elementary, but that pot, Mr. Leon has really, we are leaving for the new leadership of the board to determine what they want to do with it. It can be used through the end of September 30th of 2024. So you have all of next year and all of the following year to use that money. So that would be a great help. And then, of course, the National School Lunch Program that we participate in is federal money. So that's federal money. We also have state money. And just briefly, we've got outdoor school, high school success, that's measure 9 to 8. We are going to have an increase in that as well. And we are going to fund another position and a new strand, is that what we call it, Susan? TTE strand. So a new teacher, new classes, and Tim and Christina's program will continue as is. So that's really exciting. We have our SIA money, which has been an amazing help, $847,000, and we fund over 7 staff positions with that. That's primarily mental health and social and emotional well-being of students, so it's counselors. And then, of course, the summer learning for this summer. We have a new grant, the Educator Retention and Recruitment Grant, that's going to be $127,000. And again, that has not been determined how that will be used, but I think that's being worked on. And then we do get some state money through the National School Lunch Program. So all in all, the state money allows us to fund 8, 9, 10, like 11 or 12 positions, which is really great. And these money, the high school success money, the SIA money, those are here to stay, I think, forever. I don't see those ever going away. So I'm not going to talk about the other funds so much because they're very small. If we want, we can. I just sort of want to say in conclusion, Bank School District continues to move forward and meet the challenges of educating children in these uncertain times. We are keenly aware of the inherent financial risks associated with the budget, including enrollment trends, additional use of reserves, and continued inflation. But we firmly believe that we have proposed a budget that delivers on fiscal responsibility while pushing forward with our vision to engage, challenge, and prepare every student to realize their potential in learning and life.
Thank you, Joni. That was very nice. Once around the kitchen kind of experience. The next part of the program is to ask for public input. Due to the technology of the things, it's a little tough for me to see people in the room who might be asking. So I'd like to ask the vice chair to inquire about if there are people in the room who want to bring some public input.
I'd like to give public input.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. Here, so you can hear.
Yeah. You have to say your name.
Hi, I'm Tony Richardson. I work at the middle school. I also have 2 kids coming through the middle school right now. And building rep with the union. So I guess just having looked at it just briefly, I saw the budget guiding principles towards the beginning that talked about providing online opportunities for students as appropriate. And I guess I was hopefully encouraging to see a section of staffing dedicated for just online. I know that some other schools have dedicated staff to online programs to continue, and that might be one way we could keep enrollment up, is dedicating some teachers to that, keeping those online programs running. So that's one suggestion for budget. I didn't see anything in here with staff dedicated to that. Let's see. This page 39. I had some questions. I see that there's just one example, but I see lots of fairly high estimates that haven't been historically used. Like I was looking at last year's adopted versus what was spent on non-instructional services. It was adopted 47,500 and we only spent 35,000. That's just one example where it was like $12,000 over budgeted.
What page? Tony?
Page 39, 380, non-instructional services. And looking at last year's proposed budget, the proposal for last year was 47,500. That's just one example that I've seen lots of high estimates historically in these things. That I know budgeting high is one strategy, but I'd like to hopefully tighten it up so we could spend some of that money on some more services and programs. So that's just one example of things. I was curious what the page 45, the transfer of funds. I don't know much about that. I guess maybe that's a separate conversation, but I'm curious what that is. Hopefully the committee can ask more about what that is. On page 49, the ending fund balance, I guess this unappropriated versus unrestricted, I'm still confused on the difference between that. It seems like you mentioned, we had like increased that ending fund balance. And even when the proposed for multiple years has been down at that lower percentage, our actual has come on way above that proposed. And I'm wondering if it's some of these places where it's been over budgeted and then underspent. And I want to know what happens with our special funds, special project funds, when we do that. What happens if, say, we've budgeted, say, 35,000 for outdoor school, for example, and what happens when we only spend 23,000 of it? Where does that extra money go? Does it go into a general fund? Does it go back to the state? Just curiosities about that. So. I think that's all my questions.
I'm happy to answer the phone, if that's okay, so we can just maybe take care of all of them. Okay, so on the, I'm not going to answer on the guiding principles, though, on the online programs. I will say, because we did not obviously create another function or program of an online school with additional staff. But there is money for online schools and places when we send kids to them within the various school budgets. Maybe we'll talk more about that, but like if we send somebody out to an online program that we pay for, it's in. But the others I will address page 39. So that's our maintenance budget. And the 380 non-instructional services are our maintenance contracts. So for many, many years, we have not had all the preventative maintenance contracts we should have. Preventative maintenance would have saved our district money over the years because we didn't take care of stuff in the early years. And then it's really expensive to fix it, and it doesn't last as long, and the useful life, it's really terrible. So I have pushed, and Dale has pushed very good about getting preventative maintenance contracts. So that number this year was budgeted at 65,000 and we overspent it. We are going to end up at about 75,000 this year. And so we are keeping those maintenance contracts next year, all of them. And we're talking about maintenance contracts on many, our HVAC systems, our contracts on our roof, on our generators, on our backflow system. And we got a million things that need contracts. So that's that. So that number is not over budgeted. It's not a place I'm putting money to save, right? We know what that is going to be spent on. Page 45, the transfer of funds. So if you look up on page 44, where it talks more specifically about 45, that's basically three things. We make a $350,000 transfer from general fund to a special projects fund for athletics and activities. So that funds our coaching staffs and all the money that costs us for our athletics beyond what we collect from students and pay to plays or gate revenue. So it's $350,000. The other is a required by law $4,000, well, it's a calculation based on your national school lunch program money, but we are required by ODE to make a contribution to the national school lunch program. And every year they tell us how much it is. And this year was 3,800 and some odd dollars, so we budgeted 4,000. And then we have a debt that we are paying in our debt service fund for what is to the Department of Energy. For, I don't know if you guys remember what we used to call the McKinstry Fund. It was the Cool Schools loan. It was for lighting and energy upgrades. It was entered into before I came. The building for which a lot of it was done in has been destroyed and rebuilt, but there's still some things in the elementary school, and that ends in 2027, but we're still paying that off. And so we get money from PGE every month based on a law that PGE customers have to pay into a fund, but it doesn't have, we pay, this is half, so we pay $54,600 a year on this loan. We get half from the PGE money and half from general fund. So that's what makes that $381,000.
Does that 350 transfer to athletics? That then goes to a special
Yeah.
projects fund that's then
232.
spent in a different spot. That's just moving it from the general
Yeah.
fund into the other. Okay.
So you go on to page 60. It's an interfund transfer up the top of $350,000.
Okay.
And then, let's see, page 49, that ending fund balance is both restricted and unrestricted. There's only one account, 7,000, where that is. So when you see those numbers, like that big number of 3.2 million in the actual for 2020, that's both restricted and unrestricted money. And then your general question about what happens to special revenue funds, like let's take the outdoor school one.
Yeah.
We don't get $35,000. We get whatever we build them for. So if we budget $35,000 because you have to budget enough. If you spent $35,000, if I only, but like say we know outdoor schools only cost 23, if I budget 23,000, I can't do it because I don't have the board authority to spend 35,000. So we always budget a little high, but if you spend 23,000, the revenue is 23,000, the expense is 20,000, the net 23,000, and the net is always 0. So if you only spend 23,000, your revenue would only be 23. They're not going to give you 35,000 if you only spend 23. And that's true of all of these grants. You only get what they're all reimbursement programs. So we spend it and then we get reimbursed.
Thank you.
Does that answer?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks.
I got some softballs for you.
Oh, no.
I think they'll be easy. My name is Pat Marlia, Spanish teacher, basketball coach, co-president of the union. So on page 67, I know that House Bill 4030 was just passed. I know you have it, you kind of mentioned it, and I'm just double checking because I'm reading tomorrow about it.
Yeah.
So, you've got allocated for, services, supplies, benefits, salaries. Was that just to fill in numbers? Okay.
So here's what I will say. A lot of like that grant we got, what, like a month ago, we just found out how much it was maybe 3 weeks ago. It's not determined how they're going to spend it. So I put it in some functions and some objects. It is very possible next year that Dustin, the person taking my position, is going to have to come to the board, and we're going to have to make some switching in appropriations as people determine how it's going to be spent. I just wanted to appropriate the money. We're getting it and we're going to spend it somehow.
Yeah.
But we don't.
Right. Makes sense. Couple things. What is our graduation this year? And that might be for Jacob versus what are the estimates for the kinder? What are the numbers? And I know that I brought this kinder kind of number up before here, just kind of trying to estimate what it is and how we estimate. And so what are those?
Right now, I believe the largest grade enrollment wise is our freshman class, right about 100. They've been as high as 107 this year, but they're down right at even 100 right now. The current seniors, if you were to look today, I believe there's 85 seniors. Graduation here next week, that's been shuffling a little bit.
I have 88 for
And so, and we've been seeing kindergarten, they just had their orientation last week. I didn't hear how many members. We have admin tomorrow, so maybe we'll find out. I was after admin meeting.
Currently, we have 69.
And then the 60s.
69.
Yeah. It's been, 57, 69, 64, 74, 63. So right now, this year, we have 69 in there as of April.
Okay, do you usually get kind of a push though in August with the parents that are kind of?
Yeah, so
to that?
kinder roundup or whatever we call it, is usually low. I mean, we get the push, we get kids in August.
Okay, and then my last one, I told you these were easy. So you guys came to the 1040 estimate. What research was done? What trends are you seeing in other school districts? How did you come to the 1040 versus it not dropping off again, or versus it going up higher? And I understand it's an estimate. I just want to know how you came to that.
So there is a joke in my office, Pat. It's called the dartboard. Dartboard, it's the cube, we used to roll in it. We kind of are done with those. That was based on, we have been as low as 1,008. We've been as high as 1,026 this year. I don't know that somewhere. And so we felt like if we sort of settled into 1,020, we've got all those apartments. I mean, it was not, I don't know what I want to say scientific. It was reasonable. It was a reasonable, I think it will go back up a little.
Best guess.
Best guess.
I didn't know if you had any, the district had any feelers out there with kids that are going to come back to the district that are homeschooled that are coming back, or have you reached out to the parents through Synergy to say, hey, what are you guys doing?
I haven't been made aware of that. The district's done that.
We have 43 that are already approved to transfer for this year.
Say that one more
We
time.
have 43 that are trying to come in.
Oh, really?
Now, whether other districts will release
Release,
them
yeah.
is another story, but I would bet we'll get about 47, which is about average, normal.
Well, and I know Hillsborough kept theirs at 50, so I'm trying to get. one of those.
Forestville captures at 20,
Yeah.
so,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Jody, I was gonna, and Marla, you might have to answer this, but just for people that I'm aware, back when you looked at student enrollment and when we had that spike at 1164, back in 2016, 2017. I guess I'll just make my understanding correctly. But that was open enrollment. That was a law that was passed by the legislature that allowed parents to take their kids to whatever district that they wanted to go to. Now it's transfers. And so now you sign up and the district says, yes, you're going to leave or
Right,
no.
that law, no.
That law is gone.
Sunset, yes.
So
We got a lot of kids, well, obviously that.
well, it's banks.
No, the middle school was more like about 13, 14 open.
But that was correct. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have questions particularly about the restrictive programs. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. I'm Jennifer Hill and I have a child in the life skills classroom that's moving from the middle school to the high school. And I saw in the general budget, there's an additional person full-time certified and one additional classified. It's my understanding that all the middle school staff is moving to the high school. So that would be 3 staff and 1 teacher. So I didn't know if that was enough for a middle school class to have a teacher and 1 staff.
Do you want me to take this one? This is Darla.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer. So the way that we did budget just 1 extra classified staff member next year. But because we've had some positions that were unfilled this year, and because we are going to take a look at all classified staff across the district and then reallocate according to where there's a need, we feel like looking at everyone in the district as far as classified staff, that we'll be able to fill each of those classrooms adequately by shifting a few things around. For the most part, Kathy's staff will just go with her because that is that number works right now for Kathy and her class. But I think overall in the district with all of our classified positions, we're going to be able to fill in and make that work. So that's how we came to that.
Okay, because only in the budget, there's only 6.5 classified positions for 3 classrooms, so that'd be 2.
So here's what I will tell you about,
Okay.
between 1220 and 1250. I would look at those all together. Because right now, we sort of allocated them in this way between 1220 and 1250, but they
Okay.
can be interchangeable.
We can move. Okay.
They can, the whole thing can move, you know, but those particularly move all the time.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too. And then I'm sure in some of the line items, there's changes for the classroom, like it needs to be more accessible, like it's gonna be a changing table, portable changing table, portable sink, and that's in one of these line items, I'm assuming.
It's more in our maintenance budget, 2540, not in this budget, part of the facilities.
Okay, yeah, one of the reasons we have, in prior years have requested our child to stay in the middle school is because of the asbestos and other issues with the high school. Because of the children, there's at least 2 that like drop to the ground, move around the floor, put things in their mouths. So we had asked Jeff if there would be, an inspection and testing for that particular classroom, just to make sure that that works. So I'm hoping that's in the budget too, somewhere. Is that part of maintenance too?
That would be part of maintenance. And part of maintenance, every year maintenance is different every year. What do we need in that year? So I'm not going to tell you specifically. We have an asbestos abatement program in there, but we are very well aware of the asbestos, issues. I mean, all around the whole.
Yeah, it's just, these are not traditional students, so there's more of a risk when they're moving about the room. And do you have line item 370 tuition? I didn't know what that was.
In 1220.
Yes.
Yeah, that is our outside placements. Students that are placed outside of the district in a special program.
Okay, and then I was hoping in the budget, I don't know the detail behind it, but the pay scale for the IAs has been increased or updated in line with the budget guiding principles where it says personnel will be.
So we're on the second year of a negotiated contract. So
Okay.
what's in the budget is negotiated salary schedules.
Second year, okay.
Well, second, is that right? Yeah.
So there's like a graduated scale and it is going up, okay. Because that'll help with the retainment of the staff. And then page 20, is there a dedicated position for student services administrator?
So staffing is not, I guess, I mean, we have a position in here, whether it's a split position or a dedicated person is not, something that's been determined, staffing totally for next year yet. But the funds are in here for a 1.0 FTE, whether that's 1 person or 2 person.
Okay, because there's one scheduled for classified and one administrative. And
Yeah, well, the classified staff is the student services. What do we call it? Secretary.
Because before it's showing this year's actual, but in the past years, it's been a combined. job, a split job, like middle school, like Darla's been middle school principal.
But her time is allocated based on her, of what she does, so only half of her, if she was split, half would go here and half would go into middle school principal.
Okay, so these are split numbers. We don't.
Like I said, we've allocated we are not, folks totally staffed for next year yet, so.
So it's a possibility that that will be a dedicated position. Or- All right, thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, we're done.
I had some public comment.
Oh, okay.
I just want to thank Joni and Marlo. This is their last budget meeting.
I know,
and
the
they've always
very
done a great
last.
job, so Thank you.
All right, so is there anyone else have a public comment? All right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, committee discussion. Ron, you got anything to say?
I will just say that, I think everyone knows that we are in the middle of interviewing superintendents. And the superintendent, their job is staffing. And so as we figure this out and as we go forward, that's what we're doing.
That was actually one of my questions. Is that something that talk about? Like, what will the new superintendent have flexibility to do? I mean, it sounds like staffing is somewhat fixed based on negotiations from last year, or will they be able to take a look at all of the staffing numbers and say, okay, I want to have, for example, a full-time student services, and I'll take the half and add it to the principal or whatever, they want to do like that. Will they have that flexibility, or is our budget fixed?
So what's fixed in the budget is a dollar amount, not a person or a position or a salary. So the board's job is to hire the superintendent, the superintendent's job is to hire staff. So that superintendent will have flexibility, staff within the restraints of the budget.
So what if they decided they wanted money coming in the pool that wasn't currently allocated to staff? Would they have that flexibility?
They would have the flexibility to go back to the board. If you make a budget change amongst function, that's 10% or less, the board can approve that. So you just change your appropriations. If you want to make a change beyond that, you start this process over again. You bring back the budget committee, you say, this is what we want to do now, and it just starts the whole process over, and it's called a supplemental budget. So there's flexibility to do that kind of thing.
Okay, so even if worst case, you can just bring everybody back and redo everything.
Right.
Okay.
And we haven't brought everybody back in the 10 years I've been doing this, right? So it doesn't happen very often. So,
Sorry to interrupt.
any other board comments?
I have a staff question.
It is.
Okay. So, sorry, these are going to be from new people. So. I have a question about the technology and equipment purchases. I noticed this year, just because I have a student in the school, that a lot of the devices that were there previous to the pandemic, for example, a classroom might have a whole cart of iPads dedicated to that classroom, were no longer dedicated to the classroom, and they didn't exist anymore. And I know that that was a result of, things that happened during the pandemic to the devices. I'm wondering, do we have, is our budget set up to where we're restoring our technology to our pre-pandemic level? It seems like that would be an increase in money since we have a lot of breakage.
So I'll say yes. Our technology department keeps a rolling inventory of what we have where, how old everything are, how outdated they are. Some of the problem is some of the iPads weren't able to run with some of the programs, and And we are replacing as we go. Some of the money is in general fund. And a lot of replacements have been, I mean, that's what the ESSER money has been super good for, right? We have bought a lot of technology with ESSER money. We can continue to do that. And we can also buy money. We have also spent SIA money, and we've run a lot of things through Measure 98. So we have money in the individual school budgets, we have money in the technology budget, and then we have grant money that can fund the cycles that the tech department says we need. In fact, we just today, they were unloading 2 Chromebooks. Maybe we bought a whole bunch, I mean,
So
yeah.
is the intention for the school to go back to this sort of one-to-one student per device, and at least in the classroom? Do you know?
I don't think that's been tackled as like, this is the direction that district's going as far as technology. I think right now it's been addressing more acute needs for like having enough devices to do all the state testing, or having the devices in the classroom so kids can work on their projects and access Canvas and things like that. So
Yeah.
I don't think they've set a goal or proposing thing to the board as far as a one-to-one.
Well, I think there's sort of like 2 levels of one-to-one. One-to-one while you're in school. And then one-to-one, hopefully you could take one home with you. But yeah, I was thinking smaller, like at least while they're in school, they should have a device. Okay.
So we had a technology committee, I mean, pre-pandemic, where we spent at length about, do we want to be a one-to-one school? Do we not? How was this? And at that time, it was decided not to be one-to-one. And that's when we started getting cards and things like that. And we didn't have enough. I mean, we just simply didn't have enough money to make it one-to-one. Then the pandemic hit, and we begged, borrowed, and stole devices to get in students' hands. And now I think we would go in the direction of looking at it again. Where are we? Where do we want to be as a district? Where do we think we should be? And then how do we fund that? We funded that. We funded the original purchases with leases. So that's what we had to do in order to afford them. And now we've been able to pay the cash basically and not take on that kind of debt. But I think will be determined in the future.
Okay, so this technology decision, does it happen on a regular basis, or just kind of as someone decides it's time to revisit this conversation?
So I will say that pre-pandemic, we had technology and we had that conversation. And trying to allocate money and maintain it as a program. We weren't there yet from a budget standpoint and able to do that. So we were trying to do the next best thing, and that was to make sure that cards were available and could be moved into any classroom that teachers wanted to present. And as Joni said, then pandemic happened, and then we need to be one-to-one. But my understanding is lots of devices didn't come back working. And then trying to figure out the next path forward, I would say, to maintain one-to-one, and how do we maintain that? That conversation needs to happen again, and see where we want to go back to. If it's a cart, we have 3 or 4 carts in classroom, and teachers have a plan to use the device and implement it, or if it's everyone has one-to-one at the beginning of the school year, and you need to turn it back, what that looks like. I would say that should be looked at.
Okay. And then the other question I had was the maintenance budget. I know there was talk this year of things breaking, and I know that you just said there's a giant budget in there for contracts. And one of the things I wasn't clear on though is this just for maintenance of existing items, or is there money for new projects? Because I saw in the guiding principles that you wanted to have money for new things to happen. So I wasn't sure if that was something we were budgeted for, and where might we find out about these new things?
So it is maintenance of current things. it's costing us a lot just to maintain the current things. So it is not new, building in any way or that. So that will be through, again, committee that was functioning and getting back up and running prior to the pandemic was the facilities committee. And that is, I know, a top priority for the board and for the new superintendent coming in to get that committee back up and going with things. We do have money. If you look back in the 400 fund, our facility funds. So we have some pockets of money, right? We have Buxton, what we call the Buxton Fund. That was money that was fired back when we sold Buxton School, way prior to me. So that's been there. We have the construction excise tax money, which is money when people build in the community, we get a portion of that money. There's also a preventative, I guess that's in the 200, so never mind. So, and we actually budget to spend that money every year in case we need to spend it. In case something comes up, it gives us the freedom of being able to spend it because it's been approved by the board, appropriated to spend, should it need to be spent. But it's not something we spend, make a decision at the district office that we're gonna spend this money. It would come through the facilities committee, be part of the whole campus plan, etc. It's a big deal to do something.
I wondered with the amount of money we're spending on preventative maintenance, how high it is, if at some point it doesn't become cheaper to just replace some of these things.
I mean, we replace things like, hot water heaters. I guess that's on the top of my mind, we just spent $10,000 or something, I think, to replace one, but things that break, we just, we replace, but not like a new facility or something like that.
So we have a staff member, Dale, who is in charge of our facilities and is putting together, contracts and the maintenance programs and has identified projects that we need to spend on. And then he reports to the superintendent, and brings that to the board, whether we spend money on those items.
Okay, so if the budget is approved now and he comes back and says we need to spend money on project X, the new superintendent will have flexibility to increase that. Okay. I think we answered the other one. It was the educator retention money. You said that was being worked on. What does that mean?
So we were just notified, so the state allocated money for what they call educator retention and recruitment money. So every school got allocated money based on ADM. That we literally got that a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, the amount a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago. You have to come up with a plan. You need to work with your unions and with your community about what you would spend that money on to most appropriately retain and recruit educators and all staff. So that there have been no decisions surrounding how that money will be spent, but it will be a joint effort to do that.
So, for example, if it was decided that we need to offer more per hour, for example, for classified employees to be able to attract these positions we can't fill, would that come out of that fund, or is that not an appropriate use of that money?
It could. It would require again an MOU with the district because we already have with the unions because we already have standing agreements. But I mean, it could be signing bonuses or whatever, whatever they come up with. And a lot of it is programs too that help you recruit people into your district. So it's publicity and things like that too. I mean, it can be lots of things. What they decide to spend it on, I don't know, but it can include lots of things. It could include a wellness room in the school for the teachers to go to and have a place and, kind of whatever people decide they want.
Scholarships. Pardon me, scholarships for teachers who was reading from here. I had another question, I gotta find it. The summer learning, I noticed that was significantly reduced versus last year. What happened there?
So this year, our summer learning, so last year, we budgeted to spend all the summer learning program that we were granted. We didn't spend anywhere close. So the number you see as what was budgeted last year is not anywhere close to what we spent. This year, the high school is doing a summer learning program. The kindergarten, elementary is only doing a kindergarten academy for a week. I think it's a week. And nothing else, and the middle school is not doing anything. So we will not be even spending, I'm sure, that 100,000, but I wanted to allocate enough money in order to have it available should they want to do additional summer programs.
Is there someone who could speak to why they're not doing anything this year?
I can talk for the middle school.
Okay.
Go ahead, Darla.
Okay, so we don't have any staff who want to run summer school this summer, so we don't have anybody to teach summer school. So, I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, but that's just the reality of it is there's just no one interested this summer. And I think that's kind of been the issue district-wide and why the elementary school is shortening theirs as well and just doing the kindergarten academy because we just don't have staff who want to teach summer school this year.
I think it's been a struggle amongst all districts to do that, I think summer school is going to be something that takes some time for people to get used to in this state.
Is it not worth hire these, there's companies that provide these sorts of things, camps and that sort of thing. And so we can't use our money to just hire someone to come in and put, for example, put on a robotics camp or something like that.
We could do that. It's very open and flexible money. The first year it was more about social emotional stuff and field trips and fun. This year ODE has a whole guideline and it's much more about academics and learning than it is fun and games. So I think.
Yeah, I think that
They're restricted in what they can do. Yeah. That makes sense.
They have to be licensed teachers.
It has to be,
Like, are they getting credit for it, or is it just a program like something?
It's pretty open, like she was saying, so it could be a fun camp that OMSI comes in or the animal guy brings a bunch of animals, we're gonna do kind of 4-prong approach at the high school, so we're doing some credit recovery for those kids that need to do. So they're earning credit, so you have to follow that. We're also doing in-person summer activities where they're here. And if they do a certain number of activities and reach the hour requirement, again, you can offer credit. So, and then we're also going to reimburse kids who want to take class at PCC over the summer. So it's kind of different prong approaches. But if it was just kind of fun activities, when we're like last year, as Joni was saying, we were able to go on a lot of field trips, doing social emotional learning. You just need background checks and, people are able to go and attend and be chaperones and have fun. Re-engage the kids.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you. My wheels start turning.
All right, I think this is my last question. So I think everybody knows this year was pretty challenging from a behavior perspective. I know this having a kid at the middle school, which has been extremely difficult. And I wondered if our current level of behavior specialists had increased. It seemed like, I know we thought, hey, we'll get all the kids back in school and get adjusted and things will go back to normal, but then that really didn't pan out. And so I wonder if there was thought put into whether or not we have an appropriate number of counselors or behavior specialists in case things don't magically get better next year. Just wondering if there was anyone who, if there was any way to know if that had increased the number of behavior specialists we're having. Do we buy that service? I know we only have one counselor.
So with some of the funding that they had statewide, every school district was hiring counselors. And speaking from experience the last couple of years, we've been trying to hire more counselors and often not getting any or very few applicants. And so a lot of those positions that are in high demand in every district are currently going unfilled because there's not enough people in that profession to fill the need in all the schools. So we just recently, last week, hired another counselor at the high school. And that would be the first time. I think we've added all these counselor positions through SIA that Joni was talking about, all the new positions. But the social emotional and this upcoming school year was the first year that we'll fully staff across the district. So
it will be an increase from this current school year.
And it will be paid for with SIA funds, and it will be a 1.0 increase.
I guess the ESSER funds can be used for that as well if the new superintendent chooses to.
So the problem, we have been strongly advised to not fund staffing from ESSER funds. ESSER funds are one-time funds. They go away. So if we think we only need a counselor for next year and the following year, and then we don't care if we keep that counselor, then you can use it. I mean, you can. It's just, I should have maybe brought it. It's the funding cliff, right? You do not want to have 3 or 4 positions that are going to fall off the cliff. You won't be able to fund those with general fund money, and there will be you would simply have to let those people go. And that's really hard. We don't want to do that to people or to students. So we've been careful not to fund any significant position with ESSER money.
Yes, I can see that for a teaching position, but for a behavior specialist, especially recovering from the pandemic, when we're having such a huge increase in behavior issues, you could almost justify, well, for the next 2 years as we recover and get people back to sort of a level of normalcy, it might take extra hands on deck, I think that was all my questions.
Thank you. Good question from a new member, I like it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I'd just like to thank Joni. I really like looking through your budget. It's something I can't understand. And you made it so that we could, and I appreciate all the work that you've put into this. Thank you so much.
Feel like I'm on a steep learning curve, but hopefully not going over the cliff. So thank you for hand holding like this whole thing. I really appreciate it because I read through it before I got here and I was like, oh, I'm really gonna need someone to explain this to me. So now my brain works, but we have wonderful people like yourself with you. So thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here and your questions and your learning all kinds of stuff. This is great.
Well, as I say, I've been doing this particular exercise for 10 years now. And it's really been a pleasure working with Joni in exactly this context, because she's thoughtful, she's thorough, and she's always gracious. And it's really a pleasure doing this, working with you, Joni. So thank you very much. I'm very sad that you're leaving. I'm gonna cry a little bit here, but I've enjoyed working with you for these years. Go ahead. So that's pretty much all the discussion. Are there any motions? Does anybody want to make any motions to change the budget as presented? Hearing no such motions, let me move to approve the budget as proposed. Do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Passes unanimously. So thank you very much for everyone for being here, for the committee, for Marlo, for Joni, and for the public to come in with your questions. Very good questions, and I appreciate the discussion. And so we have no further next steps. We're done. And I hereby adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.